Welcome back, everyone, to the Monmouth Moms Podcast. I am so excited to introduce our guests today from Voyagers School in Lincroft?
Community School.
I'm sorry, in Lincroft.
Yes.
Karen Giuffre, who is the CEO and founder of Voyagers, and Lisa Adao, the director. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
We've been chatting. We couldn't even get started on the podcast because we couldn't stop talking about all things school. I have so many questions. We've worked together a little bit in the past. You've attended some of my events, so sometimes I have, if you happen to catch me and I am setting you up that day, I'll have a chance to meet, but other times it's like, oh, were they okay? And I don't even see them just because it's a crazy day. So, but I am so excited to learn more. I can't believe it's been 2 years. I remember hearing that you had moved locations onto the Brookdale campus.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's start with Karen. What's your background, and what how did Voyagers come to be?
Yeah, sure. So I was raised in Brooklyn.
Okay.
On the streets. My mother, 5 kids in 7 years, and was kind of go outside when the lights come back on, come on in. Mm-hmm. So, we're pretty adventuresome, and that's probably where some of the core root of my thinking is, in what childhood should be like. So I bring it up because of that. I went to college at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, and I got a degree in political science and communications, and I thought I'd be an attorney. And as I journeyed, what I realized is that I was always a teacher. As a dancer, I taught dance classes. As a troop leader, I led troops, campfire troops in campfire, actually, which people don't even know what that is now, but it was the counterpoint to Girl Scouts.
Oh, the competition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really so I was in a leadership position at a very young age.
Okay.
But I realized teaching was really more my passion. I went into exercise physiology, and I ran fitness centers and YMCA, recreation departments, and so on and so forth. And then I journeyed into education really because, or solidified that thinking because of my children. So when I married my husband, he had a 5-year-old who started kindergarten soon after we were married.
Okay.
And so I did the journey through traditional schooling with him, and it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. So it was a situation where, he wasn't excited. He wasn't thrilled. He had tons of energy, as we mentioned earlier, right? He had tons of energy after school. He was resentful of homework, and it didn't mean anything to him. But I would go for conferences, your 15-minute conference if you were lucky, and the teacher would say, "Oh, he's so handsome and he's so polite and he's so this." Yes, but he's not reading.
Right.
So what are we going to do about that, and what is the problem? Mm-hmm. And so I was going through the struggle with him, and then we adopted 2 children. And so I have my children 10 years apart.
Oh, I have the same.
Okay. Right? Yeah. So when I got to the second and third, who are 5 months apart, I said, there's got to be something different. There's a different way to teach children. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go out and find it.
Okay.
And so I went on a journey as a mom to visit all of the preschools in the area. Anything that I heard was a little different, I went to see. And I settled on a Child's Place in Lincroft.
Okay, I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I work with them, and I always hear fantastic things.
Okay. So I settled on a Child's Place in Lincroft. At the time, the founder, Albert DeBello, was still running the school.
Okay.
And I had no idea exactly what this was, but what I saw when I went in were that teachers were talking to children, not talking at children. And children were talking back, and decisions were being made together about, it could be about the color they were putting on their painting, or whether they were going to go on a trip or not, or, there were these things that I was watching. And I watched in the parking lot as the children came out, how excited they were to share with whoever was picking them up what was going on, and to share with each other. I remember it was crazy at that time because they had a small parking lot and you had to pull in parallel. And kids would pop their heads out of the sunroofs and be talking to the child in the next car about some book they had or something. There was all this excitement and energy. And so I made it my business. I enrolled my children there, and I made it my business to get to know Albert well.
Okay.
And she became my mentor, and she became my inspiration.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. And, I enrolled in a master's program, very progressive master's program. I wrote my thesis is the core basis for Voyagers Community School.
Okay.
So I wrote the foundations for Voyagers Community School, which is something that still gets read today. We still go back to today.
Can I ask you, and I hope that this doesn't come off the wrong way, how old were you at this time?
Well, let me think for a second. So my children are now, those two children are 29.
Okay.
So I'm going back 25 years, 40.
Okay.
40.
The reason I want to mention
That's
that
fine.
is because something I'm working on separately, which, will come to, light eventually, is that it's like never too late, and there's like so much that you can accomplish.
We could have a whole nother
we
conversation
could,
about that.
but I just kind of want to like put a pin in it because I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah. So I wanted, at the time, I kept asking Alba, let's expand the school, because Child's Place only goes to first grade.
Okay.
So what do you do after first grade? And she would say things like, oh, they'll go to public school, they'll be fine. And I finally called her out. I'm like, there is nothing in your life that you wouldn't accept fine as a definition of something in your life.
Okay.
She is extraordinary, and she pushes to excel at everything that she does. So why is fine okay?
Yeah.
Fine is not okay.
Right.
We need to continue this. This is magical. This is what children need and deserve. And so we talked back and forth, and she was in the realm of retiring while I was in the realm of starting something new. And so I said, okay, then I'll start it. And so that's it. I started Voyagers. My children were in second grade, and I wrapped up my master's degree, and I started the school.
So, okay. We have so much to talk about, so maybe give me like a brief version of how you started a school. Like, how do you even, I wouldn't even know how to do that, So did you find like a center that was vacant? Like, did you, is this something that just you knew? I don't know, a lot of people ask me, how did you do Monmouth Moms? I'm like, I don't know, I just did it.
You just did it.
You just did it.
Okay. I didn't quite just do it. I had a dear friend who also had his daughter at a Child's Place, and he, I think he might still be the minister of the Brookdale Community Church.
Okay.
And so I went to him, I said, Rusty, you got to give me space. Please give me space.
Okay.
And so I started with a homeschool learning center.
I see.
And we opened Mondays and Wednesdays. I had a van. I had everything in the van. It stayed in the van if it could. And we'd pull up and we'd pull everything. I mean, I'm talking sewing machines and Legos and science kits and everything.
So this is in Homedale?
This is in Homedale.
Okay.
Mondays and Wednesdays. And so there was a strong homeschool community in this area at the time, still is.
Okay.
And so the kids would come Mondays and Wednesdays, and we had kids doing period costuming, and we had another group studying national parks around the country and all kinds of things. We did a ton of cooking. We did a ton of hiking and outdoor recreation. And I always knew that I wanted to grow it. So I had about 17 students at the top end of that first year. And then we had an open house, and we announced that we were going to do both full-time and part-time in the coming year.
So was this preschool age?
No, this was K through 4 or 5 at the time.
And they all learned the group together.
Some was together, some were divided.
Okay.
It depended on the topic and how what the teacher wanted to teach. But these were all part-time teachers at the time.
I see.
Okay. But I announced that we were going to open full-time, part-time in the coming year, and we did an open house, and we had 75 people show up. We were blown away.
Wow.
We were blown away. And so we now had the start of a real full-time school with some part-time enrollment, because we wanted to stay true to our part-time students. And then we couldn't find a space.
Okay.
And so we opened in my basement. And we called it a homeschool co-op.
Okay.
And we just started running in the basement.
Right.
It was fantastic. And I happened to be fortunate. I owned a farm, so I was on a 10-acre farm. So I had a barn and horses and a beautiful garden. And so the kids had a lot of, hands-on experience in those areas.
Do you still live there?
We sold it 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2020. But we ran there, and we feverishly looked for a place. And it's interesting because I think you just mentioned Camp Secretary earlier. We rented that space the main building. I don't know exactly. I don't remember what they call it. But we rented the 2 classrooms, and we had the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then we
yeah.
were on, what, 43 acres?
Yeah.
So it was perfect.
I'm there every morning lately.
Okay.
It's great.
Yeah. So we loved it. We were there for 4 years. Again, we started our morning with a walk. We ended our day with a walk. We built canoes while we were there and put them in the water. We just had, and it was from that space. No, it wasn't. So we eventually moved. We bought a building in Howell, and we outgrew that building. Mm-hmm. While we were in that building, now we're expanding by year. So now we're up to 8th grade. So we're K to 8 at this point. Okay. And we decide that we want to create an outdoor school for the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So energetically, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders need a lot of time. They need a lot of space. They need a lot of time on their feet. They need physical activity. They need deeper engagement. They need to have their voices heard more. So I had a young gentleman I hired, and I said to him, we're going to start an outdoor school. And so we did. And so I believe back in 2010, we started the outdoor school. And that meant that 3 days a week, those children in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade went out into the woods. And they did sit-spot writing, and they did their science and their math, and they did a lot of environmental work. And they just kind of, there's something interesting about taking a group that's unfamiliar and not necessarily totally comfortable with an environment at that age, and putting them together. They tend to rise to that challenge and work together more closely.
Okay.
And so they built more respect for each other. Mm-hmm. And that age group, it's hard, right? You don't really know yourself. Your body's changing, everything's changing, and you kind of can be a snarky young person. I wouldn't say that didn't happen at all, but it happened less. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that happened is when I had a student who was more physically active, maybe diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, maybe dyslexia, maybe some learning challenges. Out there, for whatever reason, they would take more risk and they would be a leader. Interesting. So where they might not be a leader academically, they found a place to be a leader. I remember this was kind of a revelation for us. We're like, this is amazing that some of our children who maybe didn't feel as welcome in the group in a classroom setting was suddenly being depended upon.
Okay.
If she does it, I'll do it. If he does it, I'll do it. What do you think? Are you going to do it? I'll do it. Whether it was to cross a stream or to fish or to climb a tree, or just to be more verbally engaged in expressing their wonderments.
Interesting.
So that was the outdoor school.
So they're outdoor all day, even in the winter?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Snow boots, snow clothing.
And so there's no indoor
They knew how
time?
to throw a tarp up. They came in the morning.
Okay.
And then they went out around 11-ish.
Okay.
And they come back around
2 o'clock, right before dismissal.
So dismissal is around 3:30. So they have about an hour and a half in the morning indoors, hour and a half or an hour or so indoors in the afternoon. But midday, they're out there.
Even if it's pouring?
Even if it's pouring.
Okay.
I mean, no thunder and lightning.
Okay.
Okay. And if it's 20 degrees or below, they're not going.
Oh, okay.
And if it feels like 20 degrees or below, they're not going now.
Okay.
That was something I had to give in.
Okay.
But
I can picture parents being like, I don't know.
We had a lot of pushback at first.
Okay.
We did. We had a lot of pushback at first. The parents were uncomfortable, but the kids just bought in and they advocated for it and they wanted it. And now if you ask young students, they look forward to when they're going to make it into the outdoor school.
Well, it's funny that you say that, and it's also like it's something that we know, mostly about children. On Monday, we've in this terrible weather pattern here in New Jersey, and it's just been rain and gloom, and just not the traditional summer that you're kind of used to, or I guess this time of year. So my daughter started camp because they get out earlier at the school she goes to, so they started. It's like an earlier camp start, and on Monday it was like 60 degrees. When I dropped her off, and she came back, and I picked her up. I said, "How was camp?" She said, "Great. We went in the pool." I said, "You guys went in the pool?" And she said, "Yeah." She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "It was actually warm. You couldn't pay me to get in the pool right now."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't care.
No, they don't care.
No,
they don't care. It's an adventure. It's almost like a badge of pride.
Right.
That they did it.
Yeah. But I was like that as a kid. I was the one in October closing my pool. Like my stepdad would be like, "Get you," because I would do anything just to be in the pool. I didn't care if it was 5 degrees. So, but you just grow up, and now you're just hardened.
You need children to push you.
That's right.
To do it.
Right. So, okay. So this was.
So now we got the outdoor school.
Okay.
We're around 2000. Somewhere in 10, 11, we start a high school.
Okay.
So because we had many students who didn't want to leave. They're like, "What? I just found you." We'd have kids who come join us 5th grade, 6th grade, and 8th grade they had to go, and they were like, "I don't want to go."
Interesting.
And so we started a high school. I never thought that was going to happen. I thought this was going to be a pre-K to grade 8 school.
Okay.
So I had to adjust my thinking to be a K to 12 school. But it was very exciting. It was very exciting. We had some college teachers who were willing to come in and teach at the high school level.
Did they help you develop a curriculum too, or?
Initially we purchased a curriculum, and
Okay.
after the first year we're like, why are we buying a curriculum? We're amazing at developing curriculum.
So-
we're not going to buy a curriculum.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Are there other schools that are kind of similar throughout the country
Sure.
that you
Yeah, and I certainly
consult
looked
with
at
or
those.
that you meet with?
I looked at those schools, and
Okay.
I did a lot of work around
Research, okay.
Before I even opened the school, I traveled around the country. I traveled in Europe, and I looked at schools. I didn't just blindly. It kind of sounds like I just blindly did this, but I didn't. I worked very hard, joined some organizations, had some great mentors to help me, as I started it and as we evolved.
Interesting.
But I think it was our good fortune to find some young, energetic, smart people who wanted to teach, and then to have some senior teachers, maybe retired, but willing to come and do some part-time work,
Okay.
or even look at, for instance, student narratives, or look at the curriculum maps and give advice and parallel them to standards and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of people along the way that have had their hands in this, in the sense of giving us wonderful mentorship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And also, I think when you start something and you put something out, to the universe, the right people
Absolutely.
come to you, right?
I always say Voyagers gets what it needs. I've always said that, and it's exactly what happens.
It's something that you learn. I've been it's funny. My high school quote in my yearbook was something stupid like "Don't worry so much." Something, I forget exactly what it was. It was something about not worrying, which I was a more carefree person at that age. I became such a worrier over the last 2 decades, but more as of I think from running a business, you just kind of start to learn that as long as I tell my kids, as long as you do the right thing and work hard, things have a way of working, that you get what you need, and you know what I mean. And it's just the good things kind of come to you. So so tell me.
It's also this willingness to understand that anything is possible. I have lived my entire life with that anything is possible.
Yes.
And so when you do that, you're more open to thinking more critically, to hearing feedback, even if it's not the feedback you want. Mm-hmm. And so you're right. It's the right things come at the right times, but you're also open to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And that's about deeper thinking. That's about being somewhat vulnerable. That's about being innovative and navigating the world and being accepting of collaboration and all those things. And the reason I say those things is because it brings me right back to Voyagers.
Okay.
Because that's really what we're teaching.
Yeah.
That is really what we're teaching.
It's so interesting. I love reading about women in business in particular, and most of the books, essentially, it's the same message. It's the same, being open and not closing off, not telling yourself no and everything. And essentially it's the same thing. It's the same in a different way, or how it came to them or whatever. Yeah. But it's very, about being open-minded and just continuing to, believe in yourself and all of those things. But it's fascinating to me that you stayed the path. So 2011 is when you started.
So around
work.
2011, we're starting high school. 2015, end of 2014, I get this crazy notion, and I bought what is the old Steelman School building in Eatontown. Okay. It's on Broad Street, and I guess the cross street is Academy or College on one side, Academy on the other. It's an 18,000 square foot brick building that had been boarded up for at least 7 years. Nothing in it functioned, just nothing.
Okay.
And the funny story about it is, one of my very dear mentors, Susan Berkey, who's just championed me throughout this whole process, called me up about 4 years, no, maybe more than that, about 7 years before, and said, "You've got to buy this building, you've got to buy it." And I went to see it just kind of to appease her and said, "You're out of your ever-loving mind.
Yeah.
I'm not buying this building." And then probably about 3 years after that, I started bidding on the building every year. And I had a number in mind, and that was what I was willing to pay for it.
Okay.
And ultimately closed on it in December of 2014.
Wow.
And bought this monstrosity of a building. And hired all the people and did all the things and got all the permits and lined it up. And the work started in April of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And in September of 2015, we opened in that building.
Wow.
It was an unbelievable undertaking. I'm talking everything. I'm talking from every wire, every pipe, suppression system, fire system, everything from the street in had to be done. And we finished 13,000 square feet of it.
Wow.
Trying to keep all of the unique historic nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you talk about people who come into your life. Jim Watt, who's an architect and owns Porta and many of the restaurants in Asbury Park.
Okay.
His daughter was in her school as a high school student, and I remember calling him up and going, "Jim, I really need your help. They want to put up sheetrock and drop ceilings, and I need your help." And I remember him coming on a Saturday with his cup of coffee and walking through the building, and I knew his aesthetic from some of the things that he had done.
Yeah.
And he helped me to maintain the aesthetic. So he helped me to talk to the contractors about what I really want and didn't want. Mm-hmm. So we had all the exposed brick. We had all the I've replaced 123 huge windows. Mm. We kept the wood floors. We really kept the authenticity of the building.
And it had, I'm assuming, like a nice outdoor space that was...
It didn't have a nice outdoor space.
Okay.
So that was the compromise.
Okay.
It did not have. We had a front yard,
Uh-huh.
and we used it very well. But a block and a half away is the Bliss Arboretum.
Oh, I don't know where that is.
Yeah, so it's tucked away in Eatontown. It's lovely, lovely space. And the kids used that space as their outdoor space. Okay. Yeah. And the township, again, was really wonderful. They let us put a porta potty in there. So they had facilities, and they really became ambassadors to that property. They looked after the animals. They picked up everything, kept it clean and neat, and they went to the community days and volunteered side by side with people living in the community to keep that whole area up.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really a big commitment. That was the wonderful part. The hard part was just the building itself, because the way it was built, it needed an elevator, it needed 5 stops, and there was controversy around that, and there was controversy around finishing the other 5,000 square feet. That was supposed to be income for us, and it became very hard to carry the building, particularly after COVID. So then COVID happened.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I buy the building, we're in there, and 2020, March, right, of 2020, I'm walking the line and saying to parents, hand them a letter and saying, "I'm so sorry, we're going to close, but we'll be open soon, we'll figure this out." And to our credit and to the credit of our teachers, they figured out how to use technology with the swivel, where they could be online and be live with students, and we continued running. We had a enclosed area where the teachers would go in, they'd pull books and things for the students and leave them out there, and then parents would come and pick them up. And so we had remote learning. Within 2 weeks of closing, we had remote learning going on.
Okay.
At this point now, when we move in, we add preschool. So now we have toddlers and preschoolers.
Oh.
Okay. So even those children, those teachers were logging on twice a day, singing songs, giving them art supplies so they could do things at home. And it was really incredible. And then in September, we opened. When a lot of schools were still closed, we opened because we had these huge classrooms.
Oh.
So every kid had a 4x6 space for themselves. And then we literally had arrows on the floor. You walk this way for that and that way for that. And we were open. So we were open when all the schools were closed.
Wow.
And we also offered an opportunity for kids who had these, because you had these split days and schools were doing different things. we opened for those students so that they could be with us, and we hired a teacher, and they could be in a space where when they had to be online with their classroom, they could be online, they could receive support from our teacher, and they could join in the outdoor activities, which we had many outdoor activities, because it was fresh air and space, and we threw up carports all over the property, and we were out in the arboretum, and so we made it through COVID quite well in terms of what we could do for students. But after COVID, things changed, mindsets changed, and our enrollment kind of got stagnant, and the building was hugely expensive, and ultimately we sold the building.
Okay.
We had to sell it.
Right.
We had to transition. And so there was a stutter step in there where we wound up in Oceanport. We didn't wind up where we wanted to be, which was at Brookdale, which then was at Jersey City University. We had some really amazing spaces we were going to move into. We couldn't, and so we rented a third floor space in a building on the fort, and we survived that for 2 years. And then, as you mentioned, we moved to Brookdale.
Okay.
So here in Brookdale, we are infant, 6 months of age, all the way through high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a space that you are able to rent through Brookdale?
We rent through Brookdale.
Got it.
It's our space. We're not sharing with anyone. It's one level. It was built for our early childhood learning center. So a lot of visibility, a lot of glass. I mean, you can speak to the building. And how we use
is it where the early child?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
My son went there.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the building we're in.
So everyone knows I had him when I was 20, and I was in college, and so I ended up going to Brookdale, and I used to drop him off there. It's a great little space. It's not little. It's
no,
big.
It's 8,500
yeah,
square
it's
feet.
big.
Yeah.
Then he went there, and it was good because they had the playground on the side where they used to.
Yep.
And there was like a gym across the way, and I would actually go to the gym sometimes, and I would pick him up, and it was good. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah,
that's right. They closed it a
they
long time ago.
closed it, and then they had a Montessori in there for a while, and then it closed again, and it was just empty. And the first time around, I thought we were going to get it, and then they were thinking that maybe they bring their culinary arts program onto campus, and so they didn't want to commit to renting it. And then 2 years later, the phone rings and like, hey, do you still want it? I'm like, you bet we want it.
Yeah.
So
that's like a perfect space. Wow.
And for our outdoor program, it's perfect because we back up to Thompson Park.
Okay.
And so the kids can either be on campus, there's so much green on campus, but also they can go into Thompson Park. So our outdoor program thrives quite well.
Oh,
there.
That's so interesting. Huh, I didn't know that. Okay. High Tech High is not too far away from there.
High Tech High's right
They're
there.
neighbors.
It's right there.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes our stuff gets delivered there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the class size now?
So now we are, do you want to talk to all of that? I want to have your voice in this. 'Cause
Yeah.
This is the director of the
Absolutely.
school, so she's doing the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, I came in, I would say when Karen was going through that transition, when we were in Oceanport, so I was in that third floor, building, and so we made the transition, the move to Brookdale together. Big undertaking moving the school, as you can imagine, but we knew it was going to be worth it. We've renovated this building, so it's gorgeous now. Our class sizes we have small class sizes. So that's really, I feel like, the appeal for parents with us. They are just loving, knowing that their child is known, inside and out. Their teacher is so much more than just their teacher. It's like their best friend, and they're with them consecutively for years. So that's the benefits of having kind of the multi-age approach, is that
they don't get a new teacher.
Their teacher stays with them. So we have these really special
up until what is it? Grouped?
All through K through 12.
Oh, wow.
And even our younger classrooms. So right now we have preschool, right? Preschool, we have infants, we have our waddlers, we have our toddlers, and we have preschool. So still mixed age group, a little closer in age. As they get older, right now we have other groupings where we have the K to 12. So it's K to 5, and we kind of group them according to their learning abilities. And so our teachers, they get to know our students on such a personal level that we're able to teach to exactly where they're at. So we meet students exactly where we know that they are at in their learning journey. And so it's something that's really special. We just had our closing ceremony, our graduation ceremony And we have this really special tradition where our teachers will give a speech about each of our graduate students.
That's so nice.
And so, like, you hear the stories, you hear how much time and how much, like, I really want to say, like, how much love, like, is between, you know, like, in this community, this little community where, you know, it's amazing to see the growth that happens.
Yeah.
And they've gone from preschool all the way through, you know, our
So
program.
for you do the ceremony for the 12th graders.
We do an 8th grade graduation, and we do a 12th grade graduation.
Okay.
Yeah. And as Lisa says, the teachers write about each student. So they tell, you know, we walk into a labyrinth, and then which is symbolic of their journey. And then the teachers speak to each student in their gown and tell them, you know, the kind of how they feel and what they feel about them and what they've seen in terms of their growth and their hopes for their future.
Lots of tears.
So, yeah, there's lots of tears.
Lots of tears.
And the 8th graders are journeyed back out. They follow their teachers back out, but the high school students go in. The teachers do the same thing, but then the teachers leave. And the seniors give their speeches, and they walk out on their own.
Okay.
The idea being you're now moving on into the world without us, although you'll always be a Voyager student.
Yeah.
You know, we always say once a Voyager, always a Voyager.
So tell me what it's like for a student if maybe they accelerate in a certain subject, or just in general, right? Like what that looks like. I've had that question many times with my kids' teachers, and on very different levels. I have kids that learn, you know, my 2 kids are just learn differently, and you know, honestly, just very different personalities. But both bright, right, in their own right.
Yeah,
and I have found, you know, like the traditional, I guess, like school, like approach. And when we were growing up I went to public school, was like, you know, I remember in 3rd grade, I think I was grouped in like a table of kids or whatever, that like because we, you know, we just, I guess, got better grades or whatever. And then in the following year, it was like, or maybe a couple years later, you went into different classrooms. They don't do that as much, and they certainly don't do that in some of the private schools, because my daughter goes to one. And I find it to be like a little challenging, because some of the kids like are bored.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does that look like?
So because our ratios are 1 to 6.
Okay.
Maybe 1 to 8, maybe.
Wow.
The teachers can give a tremendous amount of attention to students in a classroom.
Yeah.
So let's talk about mixed age classroom, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And maybe I have a 6th grader who hasn't quite mastered all of his 5th grade skills. I might have an 8th grader who's ready for algebra. So that can be a dilemma in a traditional school. But in a school like ours, the student who's ready for algebra could go do their math in the high school, while the student who is, you know, just still picking up some of those 5th grade skills and applying them to 6th grade skills can get more attention.
Okay.
So nobody is left behind, and nobody is waiting. Nobody's waiting. Everybody is moving at their pace, and the teachers are moving about the room. So if you can imagine 3 groups maybe of students working in math, you could see a teacher start the first group and say, okay, you know, work on this that you were finishing up yesterday. Got that? Great. Let them start working. Move to the next table. Okay, let me give you some instruction in this. While at the 3rd table, maybe there's some like problem of the day or mental challenge around math.
Yeah.
So they can each be doing separate things, and the teacher can then be moving about the room in a, you know, an hour period, maybe an hour and 10-minute period, giving everybody the attention that they need.
Right.
And then what I also love is that the teacher will pull kids from these groups, because they all have something. Maybe they're all struggling with percentages. Maybe there's a kid in each group struggling with something like percentages. Pull them up to the whiteboard, give a lesson, show the lesson. Okay, now go back and try and apply that, right? And it's the same with writing. It's, if you notice the kids are having trouble using quotations, they don't quite know how to do that, you can stop and you can give them what we call a mini lesson on quotations.
Okay.
And then you can say, okay, now go back to your writing and see where this applies. Are you doing it right? Do you need to do an edit? Do you need a correction? Do you have a question? And then the teacher can move around the room. So everyone can work at their pace. Like we say, we meet students where they are, and they can work at their pace. We can push students if they need a little bit of encouragement and pushing. But we can also find that the student that's accelerated can be a fabulous teacher. So one way to know that somebody knows something is to watch them teach it. And so instead of the teacher going up to the whiteboard to teach percentages, they might say, oh, so-and-so, you have this, would you mind? And they'll go up and teach it. The students want to hear a peer more than they want to hear a teacher, right? And so they're more likely to invest in it. And now we know that student knows it, and that student knows that they know it. So it builds confidence, and it builds this idea of collaboration and connection.
Interesting.
So it's so different.
It sounds like it. Tell me what parents, ask about when it comes to putting kids of different ages. So for instance, you're mentioned that perhaps someone in 8th grade may be going then working on a high school level, but what does that look like, for maybe any parents that have reservations about their kids being with kids much older than them?
Right. So we have certainly had that.
Okay.
And we have some reservations sometimes about that, right? Because maybe intellectually the student is far advanced, but emotionally they still need the support of their age group.
Yeah.
And so then we're always trying to find a balance, right? And we're reminding the older students that a younger student is in their presence, right?
Okay.
So they're going to be a role model. We talk a lot about role modeling.
I call them influencers.
Influencers.
Yeah.
Now we call them influencers. They
Yeah.
understand that terminology. Parents do get nervous. Let's face it. 99% of us have been raised in traditional schooling. And so that's what we know. And we often will gravitate to what we're comfortable with, particularly in stressful times, right? So when you're stressed about your child and your child's education and you're looking for the right fit, you go to this odd school and you're just not sure and you have all these questions, and then you go to another school and it feels more familiar and comfortable. Maybe my kid will thrive there. And so we have to have that conversation. Why is this so uniquely different, and why and how does it work? The wonderful thing is we're open 21 years now. We have lots of data about where our students have gone and how they navigate in the world and what the benefits of showing themselves. So that helps. But it's a fair question, and it's one that we have to say to parents. We're cognizant of this challenge. It's very unusual. In fact, I can only think probably of 1 or 2 times when I've taken a student and actually taken them from 8th grade and put them in high school.
Okay.
Permanently, like full time. Mostly it's because they excel at something, right? They excel in math, so they go for that. Or they excel in writing and maybe just a genre of writing. Maybe they're really incredible poets, and so during the poetry study they might go to the high school for their poetry study.
But
right?
that's so valuable, though,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really like, I don't know, I think it's incredible.
I feel like it's the flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
That's valuable, right?
I mean, people are held back 90% of the time because there's no other choice.
And let's face it, there are some children who are left behind.
Right?
Because they're not catching up. No matter how much the teacher is invested. And the classroom is too big, and the teacher has too much stress on themselves, and they can't get to that student as often as they need to.
Yeah, I mean, kids are passed through all the time, believe me. I've seen it.
We get them sometimes, and we're like, how in the world?
Yeah.
But we can give that the attention it needs.
Right. Wow. Tell me what enrollment looks like in terms of, what questions most parents are asking. I guess, like, what are the top 3 that, they want to know? Are you seeing many parents that are coming actually in the middle school ages? Is that where you're getting a lot
so
of?
So we're getting a lot of calls in the middle school ages, particularly 5th and 6th grade, even 7th and 8th, but 5th and 6th. The biggest thing that's happening, listen, we'd be very open about this. We took a hit with enrollment from COVID, and then from the move to Oceanport, and then the move to Lincroft. Our enrollment is down. And so our age group is broader. There are times where all K-12 students are together, particularly for the outdoor portion of their studies. We are trying to rebuild. And so we'll have a parent will come in and they have a 5th grader. And they're like, oh, well, there's no other 5th graders, or there's only a 5th grade boy, or we get that. And we're like, because we're mixed ages, like when you go to the park, for your kids to play, or you go to a class, a self-defense class, do you ask like how many 5th grade, 4th grade, how many boys, how many girls? You probably don't, because culturally we think it's okay there for them to be mixed gender and mixed age, right? But when we go to school, we think that all 8-year-olds are together and all 10-year-olds are together and all. But then again, when we come into adulthood, I mean, there's a broad range of age sitting right here, right?
No, you're so true. It's very interesting in so many different ways, like how we think and like how, you know, we're just kind of like used to a certain, you know, cultural like way thing, you know, how things go. And I think that's fascinating.
It is frustrating us a little bit right now because we know on our list we have probably 5 or 6 5th and 6th graders that parents loved us, thought it would be great for them, and didn't pick it because we don't have another one, but we're like, if all of you came, we'd have more than enough.
Okay.
You know, so there is some of that happening.
I feel like there's always that hesitation around, like, is my 5th grader going to be learning on a 5th grade level? You know, like, how do I know that they're still meeting, like, state standards as far as, and, you know, sometimes we have to pull them out of a traditional, like, mindset, right? And they have to know that we're still doing, you know, benchmark assessments. They're not these long, like, we don't do standardized testing.
I was just going to ask that. Okay.
We don't do homework.
You don't do homework?
No,
wow.
We don't do homework.
Okay.
Yes. There's a lot of research that can support, you know, why homework is not necessarily beneficial. And so, you know, automatically those two things will blow their mind. You know, we're also not, you know, doing this kind of like data-driven assessments on our students, but we still know where they are benchmarked in comparison to like national averages, because we do administer what we call benchmark assessments, you know, 2 times throughout the year. So we always make sure that they're on grade level. But we do face unique challenges. There's also, you know, our students are not forced to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. You know, like, we build in breaks into the classroom day, and not just that, but if a student is feeling particularly frustrated, saying working on like a writing assignment, they can get up and they can go outside and they can go for a walk.
No, it's
which
so
like
important.
Blows people's mind, but it's like sometimes we need that creative space. Sometimes we need that quiet reflection, and so, you know, providing those accommodations, it's a world of difference in that realm, you know.
I want to bring it up just in case it doesn't make the podcast, because we were talking about it before we started about the camps and like how, you know, my daughter goes to this camp and I love it because she comes home like filthy, you know, and like, not to be like, you know, but you want the kids to be outside and like moving and you know,
you're connecting them with the world outside of just these like 4 walls, you know, and I feel like
the technology is just so
right.
You know, it's just
taking
jammed down their throats at every aspect of their days. So, what does technology look like at your school?
So the first thing that happens at our school is we collect cell phones at the door.
Okay.
So there's no cell phones.
Okay.
The students do have iPads at their, you know, assigned to them, so they each have an iPad, but it's only used in support of specific learning
and like efficiency, right?
Yes,
like,
we're not using, you know, they're not all on it for math or all on it for writing or various. They're on it because they need to do research. They're on it because maybe they're learning how to make a movie. They're on it because maybe they're learning how to make a PowerPoint.
Okay.
There's very little technology time unless it is specific to what they're doing.
Okay.
For instance, they were doing physics this year, so they would probably get on to a site that might, once they've done something, like they built a miniature golf course this year using their physics skills.
Wow.
Yes. And so if they needed to do some research around, you know, the weight of the ball or movement or things like that, maybe they got on to do that research.
Right.
But other than that, the design itself is their design from their learning, and their failure and what they learn from failure and try again.
Okay.
Right. You know, it's a tricky time now in our lives because we're in this sort of transition moment with AI. So again, we talked about this earlier, but you know, I know when the internet came to be, and I know like when social media came to be, right?
Yeah.
And so those were times of transition in our lives in terms of how technology impacted us and continues to impact us. AI is the same, and so it's not going away. It's going to be here. It's going to be a part of all of our lives. And so we talk about technology, which I think is another thing that's important, is to give time to the conversations around what is happening culturally, socially, and emotionally, historically, so that we have a window from which to look at things. And so AI is a conversation. There's a lot of schools that said, oh, AI is cheating, or we're not going to let them use it, or we're going to investigate submissions and all those kinds of things. We would rather say AI is a tool, a partner maybe in some cases, as you learn to use it. So learning to use it with a mindset of what is ethical and what is truthful and what is your voice and what is AI's voice, and how those blend together to create is vitally important for young people to be talking about, to be hearing about, to be thinking about, and again, for us to hear them. Right? What are they thinking about this, and how are they processing it? What are they worrying about?
Right.
And what are they embracing?
Right.
And how do we bring all of that together to make for, a fruitful, satisfying, less stressful life?
Yes.
I readily use AI, but as I've mentioned, I use it as my co-writer or my editor.
Yep.
And it has to be my voice.
Yes.
That's clearly heard, my thoughts that are clearly expressed.
Yes.
But I can do that with more efficiency, and I can do that almost with the voice of someone else. So I equate it to, if I'm writing a book and I have an editor, that editor is going to give me feedback and advice and so on and so forth. I see, for me right now, ChatGPT, and I think, I will expand what I use, but ChatGPT does that for me.
Yeah.
And we've become great partners because ChatGPT is learning my voice.
Yeah.
It is a really interesting thing.
It is.
I see things sometimes, I'm like, oh wow, that's what I said, or that's on my website, or that's something I wrote or said in a blog, and it comes back to me because it's that efficient and capable. To kind of bring it back to me, and then for me to say, oh, I wonder if I want to say that differently now.
Yes.
I wonder.
Yes.
I wonder.
No, it checks you in a lot of different ways. I've been, using it for different things, and it certainly will enhance kind of what you're trying to accomplish, but also I mentioned I had a conversation with my stepdaughter about it, and just even from a writing perspective, you don't want to use it to cheat by any stretch of the imagination, but it will help you write better, right? And it's interesting to see what will happen with journalism and AI, but for someone who is not a journalist but has a audience that looks to me for well-written things, I do look to it to be able to just oh, that's how I would say that better, and even how I like to just write an email check my tone. Are you in a bad mood? Right? Let's say this in a little bit more professional way, because it can help with all of that. So I think as long as you're learning, right, and pushing yourself to not rely on it, I think that's the best way to use it. But we'll see.
There's a lot of talk about AI in the future, and so parents will bring that up in admissions interviews as a concern. They're how are you preparing our students? And I always tell them it's the same thing you mentioned, when Google came around. It's okay, what do we need to know? What do we need to be able to do that AI cannot, right? And then you focus on those skills, and it's you need to be able to think outside of the box. You need to be able to collaborate with your peers. You need to be able to innovate and come up with new ideas, and kind of utilize AI as you talked about using it for business plans as a catalyst to those ideas and those things, and kind of counteract. And so at Voyagers, we really heavily emphasize those foundational skills where we want them to be able to rely upon each other, to be innovative, to think outside of the box, to be able to be the next,
hear other opinions, be discerning,
question the information that they're getting. Our students aren't feeding into, you know, when they're scrolling on their Instagram feed, they are researching, is this true? Is this information actually true that's coming to me? Because we've taught them to be researchers. And so, you know, I'm the director, but I'm also like, I taught international studies this year. And it's one of those things where we don't just call ourselves teachers. We're also researchers, and we're also learners.
Because
and
you're
we're
always
also,
learning.
Exactly.
Right.
We're learning alongside you. If we don't know something, we don't have the ego to say, oh, let me go, like, we're gonna research alongside you, you know.
Yeah.
And so we always say, like, we're learning together.
Yeah.
You know.
It's amazing what you're doing. And I always say, you know, I never understand the teachers that have, you know, that are mean, or that, you know, they have that, you know, my daughter had a teacher last year where she was just always upset. She came home crying every single day, and it was part of the reason why we left that school, and it was actually most of the reason. And, you know, I'd say to myself, like, why do you ever want to be that teacher? Because think back to when you were growing up. What do you remember about school?
Yeah.
The good teachers.
Good teachers.
Right?
Yeah.
The good teachers.
Always.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you remember the bad teachers, but you remember them in a way that did not in any stretch of the imagination help you, right?
Yeah.
At all.
Right.
And it's so true.
Yeah.
You know, you get more bees with honey. Like, it's just it's just the way that it works, and you learn more when someone is, you know, really opening your mind. And, you know, I think it's fascinating that this resource is available in our community. Tell moms where they can find you if they want to schedule a tour, or do you do summer camps? Or
Yeah, so we have a preschool summer program right now.
Okay.
You know, we have our K-12 in session during, you know, this typical school year. And they can find us at voyagerscommunityschool.org. But we also we are very much all over social media, so you'll find us on our Instagram at VoyagersNJ.
Yes.
You know, you'll see the behind the scenes, and so much of what goes into our learning. So I would definitely encourage, you know, the listeners to check us out
follow
there.
along.
Yeah, follow
Will
us
you
along.
be? I think you're coming to the Fall Fest. Are you coming to Coachella?
You're
doing
Be
Coachella.
at
Okay.
Coachella.
Coming to your
We
event.
love
Yeah.
that.
Fabulous.
So you can visit the table and say hello there.
Yes.
We're excited for Coachella. That's our first summer event we've done.
I want to give a shout out to you guys.
Yeah.
All the moms, you.
Seriously.
What
Thank you.
you've done over this short period of time is truly remarkable.
Thank
I've
you.
watched you grow from, you know, from a distance, and just, I'm so impressed.
Yeah, we're cheering you
And
on.
it's such an amazing resource.
Thank you.
Such an
It really
amazing
is.
resource.
I'm, you know, I try. I don't know. It started, you know, something that I just knew was a need, you know, from raising my son in the community, and there's a lot of communities that actually don't have something like this.
They don't.
We just have 2 new moms that started Essex County, and I had a call with them because I help some of the other moms, and I said, is there anything here? And they said no, and I was like, you know, I'm glad, but it's something that's such a need to really kind of, you know, bring awareness to all the incredible resources in our community, and really, like, that's my passion, is just driving that, and you know, just providing as much information so parents can make informed decisions. You know, I was thinking while you were telling me your story about, I grew up in Hazlitt. I didn't know that, you know, that you were there, you know, and maybe my mom didn't either, and we you know, we went to public schools, and I just find it fascinating that you were doing this, like, while we were growing up. I think it's so cool. So thank you for sharing your story. You are so inspiring. I hope that that moms reach out, and we're going to get this enrollment up, and we're going to keep the school growing, and I can't wait to see what the next 10 years brings.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah.